Howdy everybody. You know, it seems like everybody's going into homesteading lately. You hear all kinds of stories about it. As a matter of fact, so many stories of people facing hardship that it's almost like the homesteading movement of today is recapitulating the old movement from the east to the west in the United States, where people were going in covered wagons and they suffered a lot during those times. But just like with the covered wagons, many of those people failed. They stopped along the way and stayed where they were, or they passed away. They didn't make it. There's a lot of people that go into homesteading today that fail too. And I'm going to talk today about the number one reason for that. But I'm out here making a new paddock for the sheepies. I'm putting the electrical fence up. I already have the posts set. So what is the number one reason that homesteaders fail?
Oh, what do you have in your belt?
This is my Christmas present from Lena. This is a scabbard from my machete.
Oh.
I used to have the machete and I used to hold it like this underneath my arm, and I was picking something up and I forgot that I had the machete, and the machete went down right here in my boot. You could see the hole it made in the boot and cut both of my toes, so I had a pretty serious cut. So that was the motivation for getting the scabbard, and you can see this scabbard was made especially for me. Has my initial here and a flower down below. You can look at the stitching. It's 100% leather. There's no plastic or no other kind of material in here. This is 100% leather, and it costs $13. Can you believe that? You know, if we went in the southwestern United States where you might be able to buy something like this, you could easily pay $75 for a handmade, hand-sewn. This wasn't made in a machine. This is one of a kind. So I'm very proud of it, and it works very well. And the only thing, when I asked the guy to make it, I didn't tell him that I was left-handed. And so he, of course, made a right-handed scabbard. It's okay. Left-handed people, we always have to adapt to a right-handed world, so it's nothing new for me. Back to the reason why homesteaders fail. The number one reason for it is that new homesteaders overextend themselves. That's the reason that they fail. Now, let's examine what overextended actually means. So you can be overextended in many different ways. One of them is that people buy too much land. They're overextended in the amount of land that they bought. Owning land is a status symbol. And so there's always the temptation to own as much land as possible. The biggest possible farm or the biggest possible ranch. And when we hear about it, we go, oh, that guy has 5,000 acres. Well, let's hope he's actually able to use those 5,000 acres for something constructive, if nothing more than just protecting the ecosystem. The point is, most people, when they're looking for land, are not actually thinking about how they're going to be using it. They're looking for something that they like. A lot like buying a car. They're not thinking about how is this car in terms of its practicality. They're thinking about how beautiful the car looks and how it increases their status. Land is much the same way. People buy land because it has a beautiful view. Virtually everything should be secondary to what you actually are planning to do. Now, you may not have a firm idea of everything that you want to do, but you should at least have a general idea. That's the first thing. People tend to buy too much land. They think they need more than they really need. And there are plenty of books and YouTube videos you can watch of people who have small pieces of land that are actually producing huge amounts of vegetables and other things. Now, for animals, you do need more land, but we can get into that another time. So that leads me into the next thing, and that is people overextend themselves with the number of animals that they get. They say, we want to raise sheep, and so they get 20 sheep. Well, I've got news for you. If you don't have experience, 20 sheep is an enormous amount, and it's an enormous responsibility. Remember, when you have an animal, that animal depends 100% on you. You protecting them, you feeding them, you giving them water. If they're sick, they depend on you to have the veterinarian come. They depend on you. 20 sheep is like having 20 children, a lot like it. People jump in, they don't have the infrastructure to support the number of animals that they get. Everything falls apart. They do that with chickens. Maybe they buy 100 chickens. They do it with duck. Maybe you live in the tropics and you want to grow coffee. And so you order 5,000 small plants of coffee to plant. And guess what? Probably half of those are going to die. Maybe even more than half. If you don't have the infrastructure lined up to look at your soil, to have people that are going to come and actually plant that stuff and they're going to be reliable, you wind up losing a lot of your investment. Does that mean you won't be able to survive at all? No, but it's the kind of things that wind up killing a homesteader's dream, is being completely overwhelmed. And we have to ask the question, why are you overwhelmed? And if we really trace it back, in many instances, it's because you've overextended yourself at the beginning. Maybe you bought a brand new tractor, or you bought other equipment that you didn't really need at the time, but it seemed like a good idea. It seemed like you might need it at some point, and maybe there was a good deal to be had on that. And so you went ahead and spent some money on a tractor, even though you didn't really need one. But you're a farmer because you have a tractor. You have the status symbol of being a farmer, a tractor. You know, Greg Judy, the regenerative rancher, Greg Judy has all of this land that he grazes. He has huge numbers of cattle and sheep that he grazes on that land. Most of it he doesn't own, most of it he rents, and he doesn't have even one barn. Even though he's in Missouri, where they have very harsh winters. And you might think that he might have to have a barn, but he doesn't. And if you hear Greg talk, he says, I started out and I bought all the stuff, I did everything that everybody told me to do, and I went broke. And the only thing that saved him was that he had a job in town that he had worked for quite a while, so he had built up some seniority in that job, and he had the determination to succeed. So he almost went broke. He kept going anyway. But he rethought what he really needed and what he didn't need. Now you might be watching me here and see that I'm threading these posts, and I'm not using one of the reels that are very common to use with this sort of thing. And the reason why is because when I first bought this equipment, they didn't have the reels here in Nicaragua. And so I had to figure out something different that would help me to manage all of this wire. And I realized that I could wrap it around the stakes. It's not as fast as using a reel, but basically accomplish the same thing. That's an example of me not planning well enough ahead. And trust me, Lena and I, we've made a huge number of mistakes, but we've kept going. You can hear people on YouTube that will say, oh, we just threw caution to the wind and went out. Well, guess what? For every person on YouTube that tells you that, there's at least 20 that did it and failed. You'll never hear about it. So don't use that as a guide. You know, I talked about the migration of people from the eastern United States to the west, the gold rush, and all of those people who went for the gold. And how many people actually got gold and made a lot of money? Not many. You didn't hear much about the people who failed. But the failure rate in that gold rush was huge. There's a rush to homesteading as well. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't go into homesteading. As a matter of fact, I encourage people to do that. But think about what you're doing first and don't overextend yourself. With that, I'll end the video here. Thank you very much for watching.